Hello and welcome back to Honey Badger 3D Print and Paint. Today we are taking a look at the Captain America model that we've just finished. But first of all, roll those credits. Okay, so this is our Captain America. Now, we bought this model originally when it was on Special STL, which is a private Facebook group. It was done by an artist called Suarez, and I believe he was copying one that was done by Poptotem. As far as I am aware, there is not a legitimate way to buy this model anymore. I will link to Suarez's ArtStation profile in the video description. It pops up on a few fake piracy sites, but to the best of my knowledge, you can't actually buy this model anymore. And that's a shame, because this model is cut, keyed, designed and executed really quite well. So we blew this guy up 200%. He's mainly printed in FDM, except for his head, which I did on the Nova 3D Ben 5. I did it in resin. I did not hollow it out, so that is actually quite an expensive head. So if we're looking at size, we have got 500 by 300 by 550. So he is a chunky boy. There's a lot of things that I struggled with this model. First and foremost, I struggled with the shield. So if we take a little look at the shield here, you'll see that he's actually really smooth. Doing the shield in FDM was a terrible idea, but I don't have a resin printer that's large enough to be able to do it the way I wanted to in resin. So what I ended up using was I used Replaflow. Replaflow changed that model completely. So the model actually, the arm actually comes attached to the shield. Not the best way to have cut that. I would have had it so the arm printed separately and then keyed onto the shield, but you couldn't do that. So as a result, I had a lot of supports on this. Now I use tree support, so my support settings are pretty good, but there was some support interface issues. There was some, so the shield basically printed standing up. So as the shield went out to create that dome effect, we had obvious issues with FDM. I sanded it, primed it, really wasn't happy. I put the Replaflow on it, passed a little bit of sandpaper over it, and I was much happier with how it came out. The reds that I used are Tamiya paints. So you paint the underside, you paint a base coat of silver, basically like a chrome paint, and then you go over the top, and it almost goes over like a glaze, and it gives a really good colour. So we actually did the same on our Hulkbuster as well, that you'll remember from a few weeks ago, a few months ago even, and that came out really nice. It gives a pretty good approximation of like a metal effect, but you can still get all your colours. The Tamiya does not spray well, I'll say that much. So all of this is hand painted, which as a result has meant that on some parts of this you can still see brush marks and it's not as solid as I wanted it to be. But I had to stop doing this at some point, and this was the point that I stopped doing it at. So getting his blue right, very hard. I couldn't find a model paint colour that I was really happy with, and if I'm willfully honest, this isn't really the blue I was going for. So the original blue I was going for was sort of quite a deep, dark royal blue, but that didn't work out because I didn't have the right colour, and even when I did, it was really hard to do lowlights and highlights in that. So I went with a slightly brighter blue than perhaps you would normally have got. I used some Vallejo browns to get my leather effect, which I think came out pretty well. There were definitely some things that I would do differently next time. So for a start, I would have resin printed Mjolnir. I think, to be honest, I'm pretty sure I could have fitted him if I'd have played about with orientations. I probably could have fitted that on a resin printer, and I think that would have looked a lot nicer. You can half see on the top some of the top of Mjolnir is just a little bit rougher than I would normally like. Believe it or not, the vast majority of this was printed on either my Fokoos Odin 5 or on my artillery Hornet. They have really become my workhorses at the moment. My Sidewinder did the base, and that did a really good job. So the base I did a little differently than what I normally do. So I bought some, you can buy them for model railways. They're little stick-on bits of grass and flowers. They sort of bring the base to life. One of the major issues I have with a lot of bases is they seem to be somewhat of an afterthought. It amazes me how often models are just a pile of rocks that someone is standing on. They don't really build them into a story of the model or the pose or the scene or any of that sort of stuff. I think this scene is supposed to be, obviously, when Captain America is standing up to Thanos in Endgame and they're standing in sort of the ruins of the Avengers base. So I assume that's what all these girders are. But the base did feel a little bit plain to me, if I'm willfully honest. I mean, okay, it's got a few girders and things like that, but it's not telling a story. It's not part of the model. It's just the modeler couldn't get him to stand up on his own, so they put him in a base that would mean that he could. That being said, the base prints in 3 parts on this one because I had to cut it and key it so that it would fit on my Sidewinder. So there's one join right here, and then there's another one right at the end. I used a Rust-the-Lems Stone Effect spray paint on this, and it sort of spits out little flecks, hides a lot of sins, so you can do quite a lot of hiding with it. It bridges a lot of gaps, smooths out a lot of layer lines. You will lose detail if you use it, but if you're literally painting rocks, challenge, it doesn't really matter. Other than that, he really wasn't anything wildly special. So I think he's about 1,200 hours printing all in, mainly because the size of his torso and the size of his legs, they were quite difficult to get them to get them printing in the right orientation with a lot of supports. I do use tree supports for all of my models, and I find that makes a really big difference to the amount of filament that I use. The only issue really is that means you are stuck in Cura, because Cura are pretty much, as far as I'm aware, the only slicer that lets you use tree supports. I think you'll agree that the overall effect is really good, but the reality is that I would have liked him, I would have probably liked to have done him in resin if I had a large enough resin printer. With saying that, keep an eye on the channel because we have got some big things coming up that are going to make a real difference to the quality of the models we're able to produce. And to be honest with you, I immediately noticed when I was painting this, the quality difference between the head, which was done in resin, and the rest of the body that was done in FDM. I had to use a couple of coats of primer. I was sort of playing about a little bit more with sanding and filing back to get rid of support interface surfaces and things like that. But the head really came out almost exactly as I wanted it to. If anything lets it down, it's sort of my paint job and my skill level. The problem is that you're always battling with the two, right? You're always battling with the how can my paint job do this justice without your paint job outshining the print job, and then the print job is actually letting you down, and the same vice versa. Doing these types of models in resin would mean that the only thing holding it back would be my painting skills, which are not the finest in the world by any stretch. So I would start pushing myself more to try new painting techniques, to try new textures, to try new ways of low lighting and highlighting, because any more effort on the body than I have put in with this, and you'd start to see the flaws in the print job, and it would sort of feel like that effort was kind of wasted a little bit, I think. So anyway, I'm really happy with how he turned out. He's only about 2 kilos of filament in the end. It's quite a low infill that I used, so I only used about 5% infill. To be honest with you, the most expensive part of this was his head, because that's about 200 grams, just because of the fact that literally I didn't hollow him out, so he's just solid resin. I really enjoyed doing him, and he's replacing an old Captain America model that I did that got broken sort of fairly recently. That was the one where, and I'm sure some of the sort of longer watchers of the channel will remember, he had a flag that he was planting, and that flag broke me as a person, if I'm honest. Doing the stars and stripes in a flag that was already sort of asymmetrical was incredibly difficult, and it did not come out the way I wanted it to. It was intensely frustrating, and I'm glad this one doesn't have a flag that I had to try and sort of work into it. Other than that, the model was really fun to do, and I hope you like the paint job. We tried really hard on it. We've got some really exciting things coming up on the channel. We've got some bigger printers coming, some bigger resin printers coming, and we've got some specialist resins coming that are going to allow us to try all sorts of new things. So stay tuned. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll catch you on the next video.